South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized his plan to focus on building the economy and increasing investment, saying the country needs to make the economy grow faster to combat the effects of unemployment. Addressing the country during the State of the Nation address on Thursday, Ramaphosa also declared South Africa's energy crisis a national disaster. The president says he will appoint a Minister of Electricity in the presidency, with the minister focusing full-time on working with Eskom to end load shedding. In order to avoid confusion, Ramaphosa said the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, will remain Eskom's shareholder representative and will steer the power utilities restructuring. This is despite a proposal by the ANC that state-owned entities be moved out of Gordhan's department and into the relevant policy departments. Now, other efforts to address the crisis include supporting Eskom with additional funding for diesel needed to run its gas-fired turbines, as well as tax incentives for businesses and households that install solar panels. So this morning, we're being joined by Professor Andrew Roux from South Africa to help us shed light on this particular kind of economic reform that President Cyril Ramaphosa is bringing on board. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the President delivered the State of the Nation address and outlined priorities of his administration. What do you make of the President's speech? Let's start from there.
Yeah, that's a difficult question because I think people expect far too much from what is a State of the Nation address. After all, it is supposed to be a kind of a recap and inventory of where we are and where we might be heading in the short term. I think people expect too much. They expect that in this brief address, all the country's problems will be solved almost overnight. In the past, these addresses have tended to be almost very well articulated wish lists. This time, I think one of the biggest benefits of this State of the Nation address is far more practical, focusing on not all the different problems. It's impossible to solve them all simultaneously. They're looking for one or two which might have the biggest short-term leverage. And obviously, rolling blackouts or load shedding is right at the top of that list. Estimates reckon that between 1 and 2 percentage points of the country's economic growth rate have been shaved off by these rolling blackouts. So a big part of the speech was focused on all of that, Eskom, electricity, rolling blackouts, and suggestions. And then just that, we spoke about other state-owned enterprises, the importance of water security, the importance of transport, Transnet, which is our national rail carrier. And we also mentioned the desperate need to be able to attract at least 2 trillion rands worth of foreign investment over the next few years. But the focus, as I say, was on the more short-term, I think that's the short-term pivotal factor, and that is the Eskom.
Okay, well, the President declared the power crisis in the country a national disaster, and he made an announcement saying that a new Minister of Electricity would be appointed in the presidency to deal with the challenge. So, as a new electricity minister, what South Africa needs to change the narrative in the energy sector, and do you think that declaration will make any change whatsoever?
Yeah, I think both announcements, both big announcements. One, as you say, the state of national disaster, and then appointing a Minister of Electricity. Both, I think, are profound and almost radical announcements. And I do not think that the majority of people might support the idea, possibly because the detail is not very clear. So a state of disaster, one would think that the purpose of that is to allow the decision makers, the authorities, to neatly and lawfully circumvent all kinds of bureaucracy and red tape. In addition, as pointed out, the state of disaster will mean that very important, crucial activities such as healthcare, hospitals, will be exempt from load shedding. But the rest of the detail really is not all that clear. He mentioned that there will be tax rebates, tax deductions for households and businesses that install solar energy. The detail there, of course, we'll probably only start getting in a couple of weeks' time when we have the budget speech, where the real business takes place in terms of government spending plans, how much it wants to spend, how it's going to finances, etc. We'll also have to look at the budget speech to find out whether an amount will be allocated for purchasing diesel, which Eskom often uses to keep at least some of the power stations going. So that kind of reaction in terms of a state of disaster is a drastic one. And the second one, the Minister of Electricity, one wonders exactly what that person's role is going to be. We have a Minister of State-owned enterprise, public enterprises. We have a Minister of Mineral Energy and Resources. We have Eskom itself with its board and leadership. And now we have this fourth person, official. And exactly where the lines are going to be drawn is not at all clear. One hears that it might be just yet another cog in this already complex wheel.
All right. Now, some people are actually speculating or a bit pessimistic that the country might not be able to afford a Minister of Energy. Now, are there any socioeconomic implications or some sort of implication if the presidency goes ahead to appoint a Minister of Energy to deal with the crisis?
Yeah, you see, we do have a Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy as it is, so that's what makes it so complex. I must add, he also mentioned a few times in his speech last night that he intends to restructure government. Now, that could be something with a wide-reaching implication. There have been rumors, as it is, over the last week or so, about some cabinet minister shuffles, but maybe he's aiming at more than that. I mean, we have been loaning the platform for many, many years. We do have a top-heavy cabinet, lots and lots of ministers and even more deputy ministers. So I'm speculating, but one wonders whether he's not going to perhaps rationalize some departments, combine them, and try to reduce the number of ministers. But we don't know when that announcement will be made. There was speculation he might make an announcement regarding new ministers just prior to the speech. Others have said just after the speech. So we'll have to see what just after means. But as I say, that's interesting observation. He wants to restructure government. Could also have wide-reaching implications. And we'll have to see what status then different ministers assume. Perhaps just to add, this newly announced one, Minister of Electricity, is going to be located, the person is going to be located within the presidency, like one or two others, which is suggesting that he wants to keep a very hands-on approach regarding that portfolio, because the person will be literally located probably on the same floor as the president's office. And for some people, that might be a good thing. Others say that smacks of some kind of autocracy, and/or it's a reflection of his mistrust or distrust of the current people charged with looking after electricity.
Professor Andre, now Eskom's spokesperson reacted to the president's declaration on the state of electricity disaster. I would like you to let us take a listen to this excerpt and tell us what you make of it.
So could you just mind repeating the question? He said something about the state of disaster.
Professor Andre.
Sorry.
Professor Andrew, so this is what I'm saying. We have an excerpt of what the Eskom's spokesperson said in reaction to the president's declaration. So I would like you to just watch and listen to what he has to say so that you can pass a verdict on it. So just stay with us and watch this.
With regards to the president's speech in the State of the Nation address, declaring a state of electricity disaster, Eskom will study the detail in the Government Gazette to understand the implications of the declaration before it can provide any further comment. With regards to the creation of a new government department for electricity, Eskom is unable to comment on any policy decisions and, of course, will continue to work with the government through the shareholder ministry.
All right, he talked about the Department of Electricity and the compartmentalization of the energy and, of course, the power sector. But then the comment didn't really give us much details. But I'd like you to tell us what you think the implication of the declaration would be, looking at the angle that the Eskom's spokesman is coming from. Professor Andre.
Yes, it was interesting. He referred to the stakeholder minister, the Minister of Public Enterprises, gentleman named Pravin Gordhan. And again, I think we might be on the brink of a possible turf war. I think it is going to create confusion as to who is ultimately accountable for what. The President reckoned or said last night that this Minister of Electricity will be tasked primarily with dealing with load shedding. But I mean, the whole load shedding and the reasons behind it is a function of so many other things that fall under the ambit of a number of other departments. So I do think if this thing is not managed correctly and very clearly, we could indeed have a bit of a turf war between various departments. And that could raise resentment in some circles. It could raise anger in some circles, in some departments. So one fears this might be becoming a bit of a clumsy machine to try to really control.
Professor, well, South Africa is still grappling with some sort of cash crunch, even as the economy is not looking too bright. But then the president stated that the social relief of distress grant would continue to be distributed due to the rising living costs. But then some school of thoughts are wondering if the country can maintain that financial obligation to be committed to the citizens. What do you think?
Yes, that's one of those, we can't afford it. But at the same time, we probably can't afford not to make these grants available. I mean, the degree of unemployment is obviously exceptionally high, 33%. And by taking these social grants away, as modest as they might appear to be, 350 rand, for many households, that's the difference between surviving and not surviving. It also can, of course, be seen as a way of redistributing income. I think we all know that South Africa has probably the most uneven income distribution on planet Earth, and this in some modest way helps to alleviate a bit of that huge discrepancy. And already there's some evidence emerging that thanks to these social grants, the very high Gini coefficient, which measures inequality, has dropped slightly, not significantly, but slightly. So as I say, it's one of those things that you can't afford it financially, but you can't afford not to do it either. And again, we'll have to look towards the finance minister in 13 days' time and see how he plans to finance that, along with so many other commitments. And that's the other problem. We're desperate for more funds to, amongst others, finance education and healthcare, and obviously infrastructure, not just electricity, and to finance or to think about things such as gender-based violence. There are so many claims for the government's limited resources that, as is always the case in any country, it becomes a matter of the individuals concerned having to prioritize. That's also worth mentioning that there are probably 20+ million people benefiting from these social grants. And we add to that about more than 2 million civil servants, each of which might have 3 or 4 dependents, and you find that virtually half the country's population relies directly or indirectly on being remunerated in some way by the government. That is a lot of money, a lot of people, for a country which is still in the stage of developing. We are not a Europe. We are not prosperous as social welfare states in Western Europe, for instance. But it's one of those realities of life. Once you start with something, it's very difficult to take it away. It is politically very difficult. Bear that in mind as well. We have an election coming up next year. And obviously, politicians anywhere in the world would not want to alienate potential supporters or voters. And by removing these subsidies or grants, that could well alienate many supporters of the ruling party.
Let's still dwell more on the issue of financing, Professor Andre. The president said that he's hoping to support Eskom with some additional funding for diesel needed to run its gas-fired turbines. But then where do you think it will get the funds to do this? Because it seems as though that the government is making so many promises and might just be stretching its lean financial purse. So do you think they will be able to meet up with this obligation? We have the Social Security grant in there, and we have some other kind of fundings in there that the government is hoping to bring to bed. But how do you think it will be able to get this done?
Yeah, well, again, we have to see what the minister's figures show us in a few weeks' time, including what we don't know is the tax revenue. We had a very surprising and pleasing surprise a year ago in the budget speech, a windfall, in as much as the tax collected for the previous fiscal year was substantially higher than had been anticipated. But that was mainly due to the then increase in commodity prices. That has since changed. But I think that's also why, in a speech last night, you referred to it, and we've been referring to this for many, many months, if not years, and that is Eskom or government can't do this all by themselves. We're recognizing more than ever before the growing importance of independent power producers. And that can take on many guises, such as big organizations producing their own electricity and then selling any surpluses or back to, if you like, Eskom. In other words, augmenting the Eskom supply. That's one way of doing it. We have a few examples of individual municipalities who are virtually self-sufficient in producing electricity. So it can be done. And I suspect that's one of the reasons for declaring a state of disaster. And that is facilitating, expediting these kind of initiatives. So I think we've moved away from the idea that Eskom is the one and only supply of electricity and that its position as such should be entrenched. I think we're going to move more and more towards it being a shared responsibility, which of course is probably, from a pragmatic financial point of view, very smart. But we can imagine that in some circles, given people's different political ideologies, they might resent that. They might resent the fact that big business and small business might also become part of the supply chain. But that's an ideological issue. I think right now there is a fairly broad spread belief that the urgency of the matter requires urgent and perhaps imaginative solutions. I think the President said last night, exceptional circumstances call for exceptional responses.
Drawing from your opinion, Professor Andre, Eskom, the power utility firm, has been one that for years has monopolized the power generation and distribution market. But then it has gone under fire in recent times for its poor power distribution, of course, owing to its internal and external crisis. But then looking at the president's key interventions in relation to the utility firm, do you think that this will in some sort of way improve the performance of Eskom, looking at the existing power stations that it has and how some have gone moribund and some are even struggling to keep up? The line isn't all that clear, but I understood you correctly. I think we've seen, we saw a couple of years ago, the intention to sort of unbundle the various functions of Eskom, one of which is to make distribution kind of a separate function. And that seems to carry favor amongst many experts in the field. They seem to feel that is the right way to go. Once again, that is possibly why the state of disaster and Minister of Electricity has been announced, that they, the state of disaster and the minister, the newly appointed minister, or yet to be appointed minister, will then have the mandate and the political power to facilitate this unbundling, rather than to go to all kinds of loops and loopholes, etc. So much, Professor Andre Roux. We hope that these key interventions and, of course, the measures that the president is bringing in place will bring some sort of turnaround in the power sector. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.